On today's show, the Bucks get ready for another back-to-back as they try to lock down the number one seed. Jae Crowder may have played his most impactful game against the Sixers. We're going to break down where he's at and some post-game comments from Jrue Holiday. And speaking of Jrue Holiday, JJ Redick suggested that he could be an All-NBA player. Let's dive into that conversation. Plenty to get to. Let's get started.
You are Locked On Bucks, your daily Milwaukee Bucks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Bucks. My name's Kane Pittman. You can see and hear me on this show Monday to Friday and follow my work over at ESPN. Alongside me from the Bucks Radio Network, getting ready for that back-to-back, it's Justin Garcia, and today's episode is brought to you by a new sponsor, Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And we thank you for making Locked On Bucks your first watch or first listen of every single day. As predicted on yesterday's show, the resounding win over the Philadelphia 76ers didn't quite get the 600 comments on YouTube that we did after the Boston debacle. But I tell you what, people were still excited, happy to break down what went on with this game and overall discuss the Bucks' possibility of getting the number one seed and what it could mean in the postseason, because we are only 3 games away from the postseason beginning, which is kind of crazy to think about. The season drags on forever, and then it comes up on you pretty quickly here. But we thank you for watching us and supporting us, and the show continues to grow, which we appreciate. Drop a comment, a like, a subscription on the audio platform or YouTube. Absolutely. We're still trying to get to 7K by the postseason there. And we love all our listeners. Justin, I will never say fans, because when I hear people that do podcasts and they say we love our fans, I'm like, this is Bucks fans that listen to our show. I'm not willing to say that they're fans of us. They are listeners or viewers, which we absolutely appreciate. But someone came up to you at a Bucks game asking for a photo. So maybe you do have some fans, Justin.
Well, I don't know about that. He was a loyal Locked On listener, and I'm not sure that he wasn't expecting to see you at the game as well, because he specifically referenced Kane, and he listens to Kane and Locked On Bucks all the time. But nonetheless, a loyal Locked On Bucks listener making his way to the Bucks game.
No, we love it. And I assume at home games and the games that the Bucks are on the road, there are people that jump on Locked On Bucks and listen to us, which we absolutely love. So we appreciate all the support. The Bucks do roll on tomorrow with a game in Washington. And this is the front end of a back-to-back, Chicago the day after. So just a quick wrap-up of the injury report heading into this game. Grayson Allen, as we suspected, is out for this game. And this is the downside to being so close to the postseason. You get one of these little niggly injuries, and it can take you out, and you can miss an extended period. There's a little bit of breathing room with the play-in tournament, but certainly from my position, not in Fiserv Forum, he looked pretty sore, Justin. The post-game was, they didn't give a lot away, which is no surprise, but this seems like a nasty enough ankle injury that he could miss a little bit of time here.
Yeah, I know Bud was optimistic, and I think it was Eric that kind of pressed him a little bit on it, where it was very vague, where it was we're hopeful that this is a very, very short term, and then it used some different verbiage too, of like, we were told this, and then pressed of, wait, you were told or you're hopeful? So either way, it doesn't sound like this is going to keep him out into the playoffs, but I think the hope is if you take care of business against the Wizards tomorrow, look, if you could get some help from the 76ers, which I don't want to get too far ahead here, but I was very surprised to see the injury report for the Sixers-Celtics game is very clean for Philadelphia, with nobody other than G-Leaguers listed. So, hey, if you can get some help from Philly tomorrow too, and get that magic number down to 1, then you start to feel a little more easy of that. Maybe we can give Grayson, the rest of the regular season and just make sure that ankle's 100% for the playoffs.
So we're going to get into some more extended Jae Crowder chat, because he is kind of the Bucks wildcard. We haven't seen a lot of him. I've got some of the numbers from the minutes he's played, and actually the minutes that PJ Tucker played before the postseason, which are actually pretty similar. So we're going to get into Jae Crowder, some of the post-game reaction from Jrue Holiday, who spoke very highly of Jae in the post-game show. The other notes for this game against Washington tomorrow, Chris Middleton also out. So he's going to enter the postseason not having played back-to-backs in this return in late January, which is what we suspected was going to happen. And quite frankly, I think it's a fine way to go about this. There's no point in him playing the final back-to-back. And for the Wizards, no Beal, no Kuzma, no Monte Morris, no Kristaps Porzingis. Now, they did blow out the Boston Celtics last week with a heavily depleted lineup there. Porzingis did play.
Yeah, I was going to say basically that exact same group except Porzingis out.
So you still have a healthy level of awareness, but the Bucks seem to have somewhat of a wake-up call against Boston. And as you pointed to, not only do we now become Bucks fans for this game tomorrow, but then we very quickly pivot to our friends in Philadelphia and look for a solid there. The Bucks 2 games up as it currently stands. They should be at least 2 games up at the end of this. But yeah, if it's 3 with a couple to go, then tomorrow's a big day for the Milwaukee Bucks in the postseason race. Couple of minor hiccups along the way, but for the most part, they've won a ton of games on the road. And, locking up the number 1 seed is not something I would have predicted midway through January.
No. And, even early in February, I don't know that we would have predicted it. You saw this team was starting to turn things around, but it was still, I don't think anybody saw Boston really slipping as much as they did for a couple of weeks there. Yeah. I think the one benefit that the Bucks have, we caution, don't get ahead of yourself. You can't count some of these games as wins. Look what happened against this same opponent for the Celtics last week against the Wizards. But the caveat is the Bucks are fortunate in that some of these teams that they've had pop up on the schedule, you want them the final 2 weeks of the season and really around the last month, but especially those final 2 weeks is when it is full-on tankathon. Because for the Wizards especially, I think it's interesting or worth pointing out this. There is absolutely no incentive to win this game tomorrow. You see that with the injury report, and some of that is legit injuries. But the Wizards, I think, right now are 9th overall, 9th worst record. They can still get down to 5th. That I think it's 10 through 5 is separated by 2 or 3 games. If you get down to the 5th spot, I think it's a 12.5% chance. So it's still very close to those top 3 spots or 10% or something like that. The point is, they can still continue to really slide. So there is zero incentive for the Wizards to win this game tomorrow. I understand players think differently than front office, but this should be a very good spot for the Bucks.
You are speaking the truth, Justin, but I can assure you there is no Bucks fans out there that are feeling any better because of what you've just said there. But it's going to be a fascinating game. So, of course, we'll be back for the post-game show to wrap it all up, whatever happens, and probably have some news out of the Boston-Philadelphia game as well. And as I said, it could be a big game for the Milwaukee Bucks on the road to the postseason. All right, let's get to the Jae Crowder stuff, and then we want to talk all NBA teams. But first, I mentioned Game Time at the start, a new sponsor of this podcast, and we've all been in this situation before. I was in this situation on the weekend trying to get tickets to the F1 Grand Prix. Now, I ended up being able to sneak over there, but it's last second. You know that maybe you're getting ripped off. The prices are a little bit up. It's a competitive market, and Game Time is the perfect way to find those last-second tickets. Forget planning months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and plenty more. The Game Time guarantee means you will always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. Get images of your seat before you buy, which is something I like to do. I like to get trying to get a perspective of the view I'm going to have. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds. Tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through your email as well. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Jae Crowder has been an interesting discussion point, but I would actually argue that we spoke more about Jae Crowder before he was traded to the Bucks than we've spoken about Jae Crowder since he's been at the Bucks, and that's because they went very slow initially. Then, if you believe the injury report, he had some calf soreness that came up after that, so they wound him right back again. And I believe defensively what we saw last night against the Sixers, in a team defense perspective, I would say more than an individual one-on-one isolation, I thought it was the most promising game we've seen from Jae Crowder in terms of how he can work with Jrue Holiday, Giannis, Brooke in those defensive lineups. So I walked away, and we didn't talk about it a lot on the show, on the post-game show last night, but I walked away feeling pretty nice about Jae Crowder, how he could potentially fit in team defense schemes.
I felt a lot better because it wasn't just Jae Crowder, but as a whole, you didn't look great defensively against the Celtics on Thursday. Defending that perimeter, that the Bucks looked very either old or tired in that game against the Celtics. But that changed, and to me, the two biggest takeaways are some stuff you guys talked about a little bit. But the positives to come from that Philly game, I think positives were Jae Crowder looked a lot better. And to your point, I think you got a little more of a glimpse of how he fits in with Jrue Holiday and just this Bucks defense as a whole. That was the biggest thing for me. And the other thing, not to derail it too much, but was just how much different the offense was and how they just attacked a lot differently and were looking for mismatches, at least in the first half. So, again, for all the knocks that Bud will get about, no versatility, I mean, you saw a little bit of that against Philadelphia on both ends of the floor Sunday night.
And part of it, again, and you kind of reference it there, is the matchup stuff. And the Celtics are still going to be far more problematic than a Sixers team.
Do that, right.
Yeah, that also just has PJ Tucker and the ability for Giannis to not really care about PJ Tucker.
Right.
That in itself puts the Bucks in a more optimal situation to have success against the Philadelphia 76ers. But we mentioned Jrue Holiday, and there was a couple of possessions there where James Harden would try and get in a pick and roll scenario. And it was almost like, okay, well, that Jrue is going to fight over the screen. And it was Jrue fighting over the screen. He's behind James Harden, and as soon as Harden came around the screen, he had Jae Crowder right up in his grill, and then he just simply turned the ball over a few times. And I think that pressure and the timing of Jae Crowder being there on those pick and roll scenarios was great. And Jrue Holiday was asked about it after the game. This is a story from The Athletic that Eric Name wrote, but this was from the post game. So Jrue Holiday said, "I love it. I hope I can play with him the rest of my career. The way he reacts to the game defensively or offensively, but defensively especially, it's just like a chemistry kind of happens and it's there. People probably didn't see it, but there were a couple of times where I got hit by a screen, then Jay's already there." That's kind of what I was saying. "I think I'm going to have to chase over and I'm late, and then he was already there. I had to tell him that I appreciate him because the way he reacts, the way he helps on defense, how smart he is, I appreciate it just from a defensive standpoint." So I want to play with Jae Crowder for the rest of my career. Now that is a vote of confidence from the best perimeter defender on the Bucks team.
Yeah, and I think Jae Crowder would co-sign. Obviously, he'd love to play with Jrue Holiday for the rest of his career, but he's been very open about how much he wanted to be here and finish his career here in Milwaukee, and thinks he has some more time left. And with Jay, I think it was, we talked about at the top, just more confidence in seeing how he fits with Jrue Holiday and some of the switching ability and just that flexibility that you have with those two guys. And I think within that quote too, Holiday kind of alluded to it and called it out specifically a little bit later in the media availability, but just like Jae Crowder basically knows everything. He's seen all of these offensive sets. He's played a number of defenses where that's kind of how Jrue Holiday was when he arrived here. And Jrue Holiday was the guy that kind of ushered in some of those changes that we kept calling for from this Bucks defense. And Jrue was the one that was able to push it across the finish line of, hey, we need to switch more. We need to play this way against these Western Conference teams. And Jae Crowder brings even more of that and more of that familiarity. And Bud often talks about connectivity on offense, but it exists on defense. And Jae Crowder is a guy that brings that big time for this team. And that's what makes the Bucks so tough, is how good they are as team defenders. You have obviously some extremely gifted individual defenders like Giannis and like Jrue Holiday, obviously, but Brook Lopez, that defensive IQ that he has, Jae Crowder fits into there, Chris Middleton as well, a great team defender. And that's what this team is going to need. Whether it's the Celtics, whether it's the Sixers, whoever it is, we know how great Giannis is. We've seen improvements in the half-court offense, but they won the title because of an elite defense, and it's going to be no different this year.
So we're going to, and because we are talking about Jrue Holiday a lot here, we are going to talk about his All-NBA potential. JJ Redick mentioned that earlier on his podcast today, or at least I saw it on social media today. So we're going to get into that conversation there. But we always talk about the age profile of this Bucks roster. And I think to extend what you were saying there, getting a guy like Jae Crowder, who has played on deep playoff runs for the last few years, gone against all these teams, as you alluded to, there is a shorter run time that you need to present to him for him to feel like he probably fits in. So when I was looking at the minutes and the games played, and again, it's so easy to say, well, let's compare him to PJ Tucker. Again, they're different. And the most simple way that they're different for me was the Boston game that you were talking about. Yeah, PJ Tucker would be like, yeah, give me Jaylen Brown. Get the hell out of the way. I'm going to guard this guy one-on-one. I don't need any help. I don't think Jae Crowder is that. But again, in the team defense perspective, I think that he can be an impact player. And while I've wondered whether he has played enough and whether they've left it too late for him to find a chemistry with this team, when I looked at the numbers, so Jae Crowder's played 251 minutes so far with the Bucks across 14 games, a few games left. So he'll probably end up, if he plays these last 3 games, whether he does or not, we'll see. But he'll probably end up around the 300-minute mark.
Yeah.
Heading into the postseason, maybe a little more. PJ Tucker played 397 minutes over 20 games. So honestly, it's pretty similar. I think the way that they were managed, and I believe PJ Tucker had a calf problem as well. So it's eerily similar the way they've been managed heading into the postseason there. But at least, again, like PJ, a veteran guy that's been through it all, I think that you can get away with introducing them into the postseason with veteran players around him and not have too much concern. Whether or not he can be the impact guy that PJ was, who knows? But as I saw last night, I was like, maybe I don't need to be as concerned about this.
Yeah, and I remember talking about this on one of my shows shortly after they acquired Jae Crowder to a couple of weeks, that even back then it was really eerily similar, the minutes played and even the time missed. It almost lined up where it was right around 8 to 10 games with the Bucks where the injury occurred and they started to miss some time. So everything really seemed to line up. And with Jae too, I know there was a lot of frustration with the minutes and, well, why isn't Jae Crowder playing in the fourth quarter? And why is his minutes only around 12 or so minutes? 15, somewhere around there. And people pointed to that first weekend. I think you and I talked about this too. In hindsight, it really does seem like the heavy minutes in comparison to what we've seen from him for the rest of his run here against the Suns and the Heat was almost largely due to, hey, we know this game means a lot more to Jay. So, all right, I trust you. We're going to throw you out there for a lot more minutes against this Suns opponent.
Yeah, that's very true. I actually had sort of forgotten back to that. And also, this is just my opinion, and I'm not saying that fans have to like it, but you do see the Bucks play a different intensity, and maybe not the Boston game, okay, but a different intensity against a lot of these teams. So there's been this idea that the Bucks haven't been able to beat the good teams. But remember, they went on the road. They beat Phoenix. They beat Sacramento. Yeah, they let it slip against Philadelphia there. And then Boston was obviously bad. They beat Philadelphia last night. So they generally do ramp it up against these better teams and sort of shorten the rotation, play more lineups that you think you're going to see. And I would say just one concern that can be allayed a little was that there was a lot of talk about, well, what's Bud going to do? He's going to play Pat Connaughton and he's going to play Wesley Matthews. Well, it doesn't look like it. And maybe it changes because Grayson, if he misses some time here with Pat in particular. But Bud pulled the trigger there on those rotations pretty early.
Immediately. In the case of Pat, I mean, Wes, it's been kind of similar throughout the season. I think early in the season, especially before you acquired Jay, the assumption was, well, you don't need Wesley Matthews in November, December, January. You need Wesley Matthews in the playoffs. So how much of this is you're saving him for the postseason? And I frankly was surprised. I know you're getting close to paring down the minutes and the rotations to what you're going to see in the playoffs, but I was surprised you didn't see more of Wesley Matthews last night, because it seems like he's a guy too. We talk about a veteran that'll help you in the postseason, but Wes is a guy that has very specific matchups and opponents where he fits, and some others with the rest of this team where it's I don't know. Wesley Matthews, you played him a lot against the Celtics last year out of necessity, but that's not a great matchup for Wes. The 76ers seem like they would be, especially with that James Harden matchup. So, I mean, you do have Jrue Holiday ramping up the minutes. You do have Jae Crowder and some other options, but I was a little surprised Wesley Matthews was basically absent for that game.
I do trust West defensively, though. And again, I'm not as worried about the fact he hasn't played a lot. Like, what condition is he in? That is a question mark, no doubt. But I do feel pretty good about West based on what we've seen in the past. And yeah, I still believe that, they probably were resting him a little bit or managing him through the start of the season because it's such a long grind. And then maybe we've just got to the point now where it's like, okay, well, we traded for Jae Crowder and Joe Ingles has proven to this point to be a guy that we can play. Again, Wes is probably a better defender, but those were two guys that play similar position that weren't there early in the season when perhaps they wanted to make sure that Wes got to the postseason and was usable. So let's get to, and let us know your thoughts on the Jae Crowder stuff. I generally sense there's been a lot of optimism about what he can bring to this team. Did anything change last night with the Sixers game? Let us know in the YouTube comments. Jrue Holiday and All-NBA chat next, but today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. And look, we understand when it comes to life, getting to know yourself can be a lifelong process, especially because we're always growing and changing. I've definitely changed in the 4 years that I've been hosting this podcast. And therapy is all about deepening your self-awareness and understanding, because sometimes we don't know what we want or why we react the way we do until we talk things through. BetterHelp helps connect you with licensed therapists who can take you on that journey of self-discovery from wherever you are. And I can absolutely attest to the fact that talking to someone, I can't speak for everyone, but especially as a guy, sometimes you're just like, look, we'll just push through. We don't need to go talk to anyone, but it is a big help. There's no doubt about that. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge, which is pretty nice because not everyone is for everyone. So you can find what's comfortable for you. Discover your potential with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/lockedonnba today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedonnba. All right, let's talk all NBA teams. Let's talk Jrue Holiday and Brook Lopez here. So JJ Redick this morning was making a case, and he had the usual stuff, the best record in the NBA. Giannis is going to be there, we know, but who would the second guy be? I think if you base it on consistency on both ends of the floor, Brook is probably been the Bucks' second best player. Well, not probably. I think he has been the Bucks' second best player. I'm open to listening to the Jrue Holiday argument because he went through that stretch in late December, January, where he was on a tear, which ultimately got him the All-Star berth. And we've seen nights like last night where defensively he can just absolutely tear games apart. But I think on a night-to-night basis, the consistency of the defense, I think Brook gets the nod because I think Jrue Holiday has gears defensively. And I think he also manages himself through the season. Now, that might be harsh. That might be fair. That's not really a knock on him because we've seen what he can do. But I don't think Brook Lopez can be All-NBA because of the positional stuff. And it's just going to be more challenging with Jokic and Embiid and go down the list. I think Jrue Holiday, if the Bucks had to have a second All-NBA player, I think Jrue would be the one.
Yeah, I mean, Jrue won't even sniff it just because of Jokic and Embiid, and I would assume Sabonis is going to be the third team center for All-NBA. And I agree with the point, too, that it's been a toss-up for who has been the Bucks' second best player this season, and Brook has certainly been the most consistent offensive option for this team. I would still side with Jrue defensively. I agree that he has gears that we've seen defensively, but he can play against every single matchup defensively, whether or not it's one of those nights where he's conserving a little bit. there is no scheme where you can take Jrue Holiday out of the game or off the floor defensively. And this isn't a knock on Brook, but we've just seen there are some matchups where you can't play him quite as much. So I would certainly side with him there, and especially that his defense and the positions he's defending are the premium positions. You started to hear it, and I know you've heard more than just JJ Redick in the last couple of days, but we really heard this for the first time a month or so ago, where somebody, it might have been Bill Simmons, floated out too, of can Jrue Holiday make an All-NBA team, and maybe he's going to be a third-team All-NBA. And the first time you heard it, you thought, well, it's great that somebody else is finally recognizing, hey, I mean, this guy, it's great we finally righted that wrong of not getting back to the All-Star game, and now maybe let's get him an All-NBA. But you start to think, well, I just don't see it with all the guards that you have out there. It's going to be tough to climb past them just because of his scoring averages. And as good as his defense is, most voters, that's what they're going to look at. Of, well, yeah, I get he's a two-way player, but he's averaging 19 points a game, and you got other guards that are averaging 25, and we have more guys scoring 30 than ever before in this offensive league. But it has started to kind of break into his favor, where now all of a sudden there are very interesting arguments. I mean, Ja Morant was a shoo-in for first-team All-NBA, and now he's probably going to make one of those three teams. I don't think it's going to be first team, and that suspension played a role in it. Damian Lillard, for a while, he was a lock too, but he's going to finish the season probably with like 58 games played.
58.
Under the new CBA. He wouldn't be eligible, so it's going to be interesting to see where he falls. Steph Curry, as great as he's been, same thing. He's going to be around mid-50s. He's not going to hit 60, I don't believe, for games played. So all of a sudden you start picking off some of these names, and you say, well, who are the locks? Luka's going to be there. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, I think, should be first team. De'Aaron Fox is probably going to be there at this point. Donovan Mitchell certainly will be there. But it does seem like you have 4 or 5, all right, these guys are locks, and then some of those names we talked about where you question, well, games played, can we include them? There's going to be one opening, maybe even 2, where you say, Jrue's got a pretty strong case here.
The games limit is fascinating, and for those curious, obviously all the CBA stuff, it's kind of still trickling out. So we're going to do a podcast around that and discuss what it means for the Bucks, because certainly it does seem like the Bucks might be one of the teams that are impacted as one of the tax teams and successful teams. So we're going to get into all the CBA stuff. But the games limit stuff, even though it's not official this year, I think it does play into voters' minds there a little bit. And it does kind of feel like there'll be some guys that are in the mix. Devin Booker's in the low 50s. Like, can he make it? Not sure about that. And then you're going down as far as to Jrue Holiday in a battle with someone like Jalen Brunson, and that's where it's going to be fascinating. And I think Brunson's been awesome. Don't get me. He's up to 24 points a game now, and we know everything that he's been doing. But come on, can't be serious.
Well, and I think so. Just really quickly, without a whole lot of thought put behind it, Luka Doncic is going to be there. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is going to be on there. Donovan Mitchell is going to be one of those names. Ja Morant is probably going to be one of those names. You'd agree there?
Yes.
And then De'Aaron Fox?
Probably.
Okay. Because Tatum and Brown are both, I think, going to get there as forwards. Brown's probably going to be a third-team forward. Tatum is going to be on the first team. So then you look up and down the rest of the list, and it's going to come down to Damian Lillard, Steph Curry. You mentioned Devin Booker, too. Do we feel like they have enough games played, and how much of the new CBA, even though it doesn't go into effect now, how much of that plays a role in voter thoughts there? It feels like it's going to come down to Jalen Brunson and Jrue Holiday. There's a pretty good chance it's going to come down to those two for the last available spot. And it's fascinating to think about what happens with Julius Randle if he gets in there as a forward. You can't give the Knicks 2 and the Bucks 1.
Well, yeah. I mean, Brunson to me is clearly the best player in the Knicks. So that might not help the argument for Jrue. So if you want to go the other way, I'm more than happy to do it, because I want Jrue Holiday to be All-NBA. He's been overlooked for so long that even though we had the Brook and Jrue discussion at the start, and I might throw that in a little question on the YouTube channel. Who do you think, in a perfect world, if you could just choose one Buck to be the All-NBA guy, would it be Brook Lopez or Jrue Holiday, and see how everyone feels about that? But I think we would agree, this Bucks team, they have to win out wait, if they win out, can they still get to 60? Is that right?
Yeah. They'll get 60 exactly. Yeah.
So, I don't know whether they'll do that. They'll probably finish up with 58, 59 wins, I would imagine. But, that's a pretty dominant season, and Jrue's been one of the guys that's been consistently there. And morally, if you're a voter, do you give it to guys that have played fewer than 60? That's a pretty damn low number, but there are some major big-time names there that they would have to overlook that no doubt, if Jrue Holiday gets All-NBA, there will be people going crazy that he got it over Steph or Lillard or whatever. It'll cause a big storm, as it kind of did with the All-Star stuff.
It kind of did, but I also think, I've mentioned it a couple of times, but just the upcoming new changes with the CBA is going to impact a lot of people's thinking there of, okay, this is going to be the case next year anyway, so I understand this thought process. But also, Damian Lillard specifically was an absolute lock to be first team for a lot of this season. But the games played that we touched on, and the fact that this Blazers team, I think, is likely going to finish with the same or worse record than they did a season ago when they were openly tanking. And this year they were trying to win, I think has kind of pushed a lot of voters off of maybe let's push him down one line on the All-NBA teams where we would have otherwise had him. And then you factor in the games played, which puts an even larger dent in the case.
I think you're right. So let us know about everything we've chatted about on tonight's show, perhaps specifically the Jae Crowder stuff and how you're feeling about his potential role through the postseason. I know we had some Bucks fans keen to get him into the starting lineup from as early as tomorrow with Grayson Allen out. So we'll see whether that is the case. And then give us all your thoughts on the All-NBA discussion. And then once you've done that, check out the Locked On Game to Game podcast. No games tonight, but tomorrow, listen to Locked On Game to Game and you'll get all the recap from around the NBA, news, stats, scores, info, analysis from all the Locked On hosts across the network. That's Locked On Game to Game on your Locked On NBA feed. And we'll be back for a post-game show for the Wizards and then, of course, the Bulls. And by the time this back-to-back is done later in the week, we'll wrap up the week with a podcast with probably the picture a little bit clearer on what's going to happen with the Bucks. So we certainly hope so. We hope it's locked up by that point entering the weekend.
I think I would assume we'll know by Friday what's going to happen. I would hope, at least.
Time will tell. Time will tell. No jinxing here on this podcast. All right. We'll be back tomorrow after the game. Appreciate you listening. As I said at the top, drop a like, a comment, subscribe to the show wherever you happen to listen or watch. We absolutely appreciate it. It's free to do, and it helps us out big time. And until then, we'll be back after the game.